The text message from my son Michael arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Mom, Jessica and I have decided it's best if you don't come to Christmas this year. We need space to build our own family traditions. I stared at my phone in disbelief. My 28-year-old son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died when he was 12, was uninviting me from Christmas. All because of Jessica, the woman he'd married 8 months ago after knowing her for less than a year. There must be some misunderstanding, I texted back. We've spent every Christmas together for 28 years. His response came an hour later. Jessica feels like you're too involved in our lives. We need boundaries. Jessica's words, not his. I could tell because Michael had never used the word boundaries in his life. If you've ever watched a manipulative woman systematically destroy your relationship with your child, stay with me. Because what Jessica did to isolate my son from me was just the beginning of a plan so calculated and cruel that it would make you question every daughter-in-law you've ever trusted. My name is Margaret. I'm 54 years old, and this is how I discovered that some women don't just marry your son, they steal him completely. Let me tell you about the 16 years I spent being both mother and father to Michael, only to watch a gold digger erase me from his life in less than 2 years. When Michael's father died in a car accident, Michael was 12 and I was 38. David had been the love of my life, and losing him felt like losing half of myself. But I had Michael to think about, and I was determined to give him everything he needed. I worked 2 jobs to keep us in our house, teaching high school English during the day and tutoring students at night. Every penny went toward Michael's future. I saved for his college fund instead of buying myself new clothes. I drove a 15-year-old car so he could have the latest textbooks and sports equipment. You don't have to sacrifice everything for me, Michael would say when he got older and understood what I was doing. You're not a sacrifice, sweetheart. You're my purpose. And I meant it. Michael was brilliant, kind, and driven. He got a full scholarship to engineering school, graduated summa cum laude, and landed a job at a prestigious firm making 6 figures by age 25. I'm going to take care of you now, Mom, he told me when he got his first big promotion. You've given me everything. Now it's my turn. He bought me a new car for my 50th birthday. He took me on vacation to Europe, the first real vacation I'd had since David died. He called me every Sunday, came over for dinner twice a week, and never made me feel like I was intruding on his life. You raised an amazing man, my sister would tell me. You should be so proud. I was proud. Michael was everything I'd hoped he'd become: successful, generous, loving. Our relationship was the one thing in my life that felt perfect. Then he met Jessica. She was 26, blonde, beautiful, and worked as a social media influencer, which seemed to mean she took pictures of herself for a living. Michael met her at a company party and was immediately smitten. She's incredible, Mom, he told me after their third date. She's funny, smart, and she really gets me. I wanted to be happy for him, I really did, but something about Jessica felt off from the beginning. The first time Michael brought her to dinner, she spent the entire evening on her phone, barely acknowledging my attempts at conversation. When I asked about her family, she gave vague answers. When I mentioned Michael's childhood stories, she looked bored. She's just shy, Michael explained when I gently mentioned that she seemed distant. She's not used to family dinners. Her parents weren't very involved in her life. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she needed time to warm up to me. But as their relationship progressed, I noticed changes in Michael that worried me. He stopped calling every Sunday. When I asked him about it, he said Jessica thought it was weird for a grown man to talk to his mother so often. He canceled our weekly dinners more and more frequently. Jessica and I are trying to establish our own routines, he'd explain. When I invited them both to my book club's annual charity fundraiser, Jessica declined, saying she didn't really do charity events. Michael, who had attended every year since college, stayed home with her. "I think Jessica feels uncomfortable around your friends," he told me. "They ask a lot of personal questions." My friends had been nothing but welcoming, but I didn't argue. I was trying to be understanding, trying not to be the overbearing mother-in-law I'd heard horror stories about. But the changes kept coming. Michael started dressing differently, more expensive clothes that Jessica picked out. He traded his practical sedan for a flashy sports car that Jessica loved. He's just growing up, I told myself. This is what happens when men get serious about someone. But deep down, I felt like I was losing my son to someone who didn't appreciate the incredible man I'd raised. The engagement happened fast, 6 months after they met. Michael called to tell me the news, and I could hear Jessica in the background coaching him on what to say. "We want a small wedding, just immediate family." "Of course, sweetheart, whatever makes you happy." But when the wedding planning began, I realized that immediate family apparently didn't include me in any meaningful way. What I discovered about Jessica's real plan would prove that some women don't just want to marry your son, they want to replace his entire family with themselves. Sometimes, the most devastating betrayals happen in public, surrounded by people who should protect you. And my son's wedding became the stage for Jessica's first major move to erase me from his life. The wedding planning started innocently enough. Jessica called me 2 weeks after the engagement to discuss details. "Margaret," she said in that sweet voice that never quite reached her eyes, "Michael and I want you to feel included in our special day." "I'm so grateful, Jessica. I want to help however I can." "Well, we've decided on a very intimate ceremony, just 20 people. We want it to feel personal and meaningful." 20 people seemed small for a wedding, but I understood wanting something intimate. "What can I do to help?" "Actually, we've got everything handled. We're using my event planner. She's a friend of the family, but we'd love for you to be there to celebrate with us." It felt strange to be excluded from the planning, but I told myself that modern brides often preferred to handle things themselves. I focused on finding the perfect mother of the groom dress and planning what I'd say in my speech. 2 weeks before the wedding, I called Michael to ask about the rehearsal dinner. "Oh, we're not doing a rehearsal dinner. Jessica thinks they're outdated. We're just having a small gathering at her parents' house the night before." "Should I bring anything? What time should I be there?" There was a pause. "Actually, Mom, it's really just for the wedding party and Jessica's immediate family. You understand." I didn't understand, but I didn't want to cause problems. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll see you at the ceremony." The day before the wedding, I went to get my hair done and pick up my dress. I was excited, despite feeling somewhat excluded from the planning. This was my son's wedding day, and I was determined to be the supportive mother he deserved. That evening, I saw pictures on Jessica's social media from the small gathering at her parents' house. There were at least 30 people there, including several of Michael's college friends and coworkers, people I'd known for years, people who'd been to our house for dinner. I'd been the only one excluded. I called Michael, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted him. "Saw the photos from tonight. Looks like fun. See you tomorrow." He never responded. The wedding ceremony was beautiful, held at an upscale country club that Jessica's parents had paid for. I arrived early, wearing my carefully chosen navy dress and the pearl necklace David had given me for our anniversary. The first shock came when I was seated. Instead of being in the front row with the other parents, I was placed in the third row, behind Jessica's extended family and college friends. "Excuse me?" I said to the usher. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm the mother of Michael." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is where you're assigned. The bride was very specific about the seating arrangements. I sat in that third row, watching strangers occupy the seats that should have been mine, and felt my first real understanding of what Jessica was doing. During the ceremony, Michael's eyes never found mine. When the officiator asked if anyone objected, I wanted to stand up and object to the whole charade, but I stayed silent. The reception was worse. I was seated at a table with people I'd never met, distant relatives of Jessica's who barely acknowledged my presence. Michael and Jessica's table was across the room, surrounded by Jessica's friends and family. When it came time for speeches, Jessica's father spoke about gaining a son. Her maid of honor talked about Jessica finding her perfect match. Several of Jessica's friends shared funny stories about the couple. I waited for my turn to speak about the son I'd raised, about the man Michael had become, about how proud David would have been. My turn never came. "We're keeping the speeches short and sweet," the DJ announced after Jessica's friends finished. "Now let's get this party started." I sat there in stunned silence, realizing that I'd been completely erased from my own son's wedding. No speech, no special recognition, no acknowledgement that I'd raised the groom for 16 years as a single mother. When Michael and Jessica came around to greet the tables, they spent 5 minutes at each of Jessica's family tables, laughing and taking photos. When they reached my table, Jessica gave me a quick hug and said, "Thanks for coming, Margaret. Doesn't Michael look handsome?" They moved on before I could respond. I left the reception early, claiming a headache. Michael was so busy with Jessica's family and friends that he didn't even notice I was gone. The next day, I called to congratulate them and thank them for including me. "Of course, Mom," Michael said, but his voice sounded distant. "Jessica and I are leaving for our honeymoon this afternoon." "Where are you going?" "Italy. Jessica's always wanted to see Tuscany." Italy. The place I'd taken him after his college graduation, where we'd scattered some of David's ashes in the place he'd always wanted to visit. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Have a beautiful time." "Thanks, Mom. We'll call you when we get back." They didn't call when they got back. I didn't hear from Michael for 3 weeks. When he finally called, his voice was different, more formal, more distant. "How was the honeymoon?" "Amazing. Jessica loved it." "Listen, Mom, Jessica and I have been talking, and we think it would be good for us to have some space as we adjust to married life." "Space?" "We won't be able to do our weekly dinners for a while, and maybe we could cut back on the phone calls. Jessica thinks I'm too dependent on you, and she wants me to learn to rely on her instead." The documents I discovered that night contained 3 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my son's marriage: systematic parental alienation. Have you ever watched someone you love disappear before your eyes? Not because they died, but because someone else was systematically erasing you from their life? That's what Jessica did to Michael, and she was so good at it that he never even realized it was happening. The space that Michael mentioned after their honeymoon turned into a carefully orchestrated campaign to remove me from his life entirely. It started with small changes that seemed reasonable on the surface. Our weekly dinners became monthly dinners. Our daily phone calls became weekly check-ins. Our spontaneous visits stopped completely. "Jessica thinks we should call before coming over," Michael explained when I dropped by with his favorite homemade cookies. "She likes to keep the house tidy, and unexpected visitors make her anxious." I'd raised Michael in a home where family was always welcome, where doors were always open, but I tried to respect Jessica's preferences. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll call first from now on." But when I did call, Jessica always seemed to have plans for them. They were going to her parents' house. They had dinner plans with her friends. They were too tired from work. "Maybe next weekend, Mom," became Michael's standard response. Next weekend never came. The holidays were the first major test. Thanksgiving had always been at my house, a tradition Michael and I had maintained since David died. I'd cook for days, preparing all of Michael's favorite dishes, and we'd spend the day sharing memories and gratitude. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Michael called with news that felt like a punch to the stomach. "Mom, Jessica and I are going to her parents' house for Thanksgiving this year. Her family has this big tradition, and she really wants me to be part of it." "What about our tradition?" "I know, and I'm sorry, but Jessica says it's important for me to bond with her family. Maybe we could do something the day after?" The day after Thanksgiving, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by enough food for 10 people, waiting for a call that never came. Christmas was even worse. That's when I received the text message uninviting me from the holiday I'd celebrated with Michael for 28 years. But Jessica's isolation campaign went deeper than just holidays and dinners. She systematically removed me from every aspect of Michael's life. When Michael got a promotion at work, I found out from his coworker's wife at the grocery store. "Congratulations on Michael's promotion," she said. "You must be so proud." I smiled and thanked her, but inside I was devastated. My son hadn't told me about the biggest achievement of his career. When I called to congratulate him, he seemed surprised that I knew. "Oh yeah, thanks, Mom. I meant to call you." "This is huge, Michael. We should celebrate." "Jessica's already planned a celebration dinner with her family, but thanks." Jessica's family. Always Jessica's family. I started noticing that Michael's social media posts, which used to include photos of us together, now only featured Jessica and her family. Photos from their weekend trips, their dinner parties, their family gatherings, all with Jessica's people. It was as if I'd been erased from his life entirely. When I tried to address this directly with Michael, Jessica had trained him well. "Mom, you're being dramatic. Just because I don't call as often doesn't mean I love you less. I'm married now. My priorities have changed." "I understand that, sweetheart. I just miss you." "You're being clingy. Jessica says it's not healthy for a grown man to be so dependent on his mother." Jessica says. Everything was what Jessica said, what Jessica thought, what Jessica wanted. I tried reaching out to Jessica directly, hoping we could work things out, woman to woman. "Jessica, I feel like there might be some misunderstanding between us. I'd love to take you to lunch and get to know you better." "That's so sweet, Margaret, but I'm super busy with work right now. Maybe sometime in the future." Sometime in the future never came. I also noticed that Michael had stopped mentioning his father. David had been such an important part of Michael's life, and we'd always shared memories of him together. But suddenly, it was as if David had never existed. "How's Michael handling his father's birthday?" my sister asked me in March. David's birthday had always been a difficult day for both of us. "I don't know," I admitted. "He didn't mention it." When I called Michael that day to see how he was doing, he seemed confused. "Dad's birthday? Oh, right, I forgot. Jessica and I are actually going to a concert tonight." He'd forgotten his father's birthday. The man who'd taught him to throw a baseball, who'd read him bedtime stories, who'd been his hero for 12 years. That's when I realized that Jessica wasn't just isolating Michael from me. She was erasing his entire history, his entire identity as my son and David's son. She was rewriting his story to begin with her. What happened when I told David the truth would test everything we thought we knew about family, love, and the bonds that survive even the most devastating revelations. Sometimes the most effective prisons are made of gold, and Jessica was building one around my son that would be almost impossible for him to escape. 6 months after the wedding, I started noticing changes in Michael's financial habits that worried me. The practical, financially responsible son I'd raised was suddenly living a lifestyle that seemed far beyond his means. It started with the house. Michael had been living in a modest but nice apartment, saving money for a down payment on a starter home. Suddenly, he and Jessica were moving into an $800,000 house in the most expensive neighborhood in town. "Congratulations on the new house," I said, when he finally called to tell me. "It sounds wonderful." "Thanks, Mom. Jessica fell in love with it and she convinced me we should go for it." "That's a big mortgage payment. Are you sure you can afford it?" "We're fine, Mom. Jessica's really good with money." But when I drove by the house, not to spy, just to see where my son was living, I noticed Jessica's brand new BMW in the driveway next to Michael's sports car. 2 expensive cars, an expensive house, and Jessica's job as an influencer that seemed to involve more shopping than earning. The next red flag came when Michael missed his grandmother's 85th birthday party. "I'm sorry, Mom, but we can't make it. Jessica booked us a weekend in Napa for her friend's bachelorette party." "Michael, this is your grandmother's 85th birthday. She might not have many more." "I know, and I feel terrible. But Jessica already paid for the trip, and it's non-refundable." Non-refundable trips to Napa while missing family milestones. This wasn't the Michael I'd raised. A few weeks later, my sister mentioned seeing Michael and Jessica at the most expensive restaurant in town. "They looked like they were celebrating something big," she said. "Jessica was wearing a diamond bracelet that must have cost a fortune." When I asked Michael about it, he was evasive. "We were just having a nice dinner. Jessica likes to dress up sometimes." "That bracelet looked expensive." "Jessica deserves nice things, Mom. She works hard." I bit my tongue, but I wanted to ask what exactly Jessica worked hard at. Her social media posts showed her shopping, getting her nails done, and going to lunch with friends. If that was work, it was the easiest job in the world. The financial situation became clearer when Michael called me in a panic 3 months later. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't judge me." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Jessica and I are having some cash flow issues. The house payment is higher than we expected, and Jessica's income is a little unpredictable. I was wondering if you could lend us some money, just temporarily." My heart sank. Michael had never asked me for money in his adult life. He'd been financially independent since college graduation. "How much do you need?" $15,000. I know it's a lot, but Jessica says her next brand partnership will cover it. $15,000? More than I made in 3 months of teaching. "Michael, that's a significant amount of money. What exactly do you need it for?" "Credit card payments mostly. Jessica had some unexpected expenses." "Unexpected expenses?" Like the BMW, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips. "Sweetheart, maybe you and Jessica should consider downsizing. That house seems like more than you need." "Mom, please don't lecture me about money. Jessica and I know what we're doing. We just need a little help getting through a rough patch." Against my better judgment, I lent him the money. It was most of my savings, but Michael was my son, and I wanted to help. "I'll pay you back in 3 months, he promised, with interest. 3 months came and went. No payment, no mention of the loan. When I gently brought it up, Michael seemed annoyed. "Mom, I told you Jessica's income is unpredictable. We're doing our best." "I understand, but that money represents my entire emergency fund."
Are you saying you regret helping your own son? Of course not. I just need to know when I can expect repayment. Jessica says you're being pushy about money. She thinks it's weird that you're keeping track like we're strangers. Jessica says, again. 6 months later, Michael called asking for another loan, this time for $20,000. Mom, I hate to ask, but we're in a really tight spot. Jessica's car needs major repairs, and we have some other unexpected expenses. Michael, you still haven't paid back the first loan. I know, and I'm sorry, but this is an emergency. What kind of emergency costs $20,000? Jessica's car, some medical bills, and we're behind on a few credit card payments. Medical bills? Is Jessica okay? Is she sick? She's fine. Just some cosmetic procedures that weren't covered by insurance. Cosmetic procedures? Jessica was asking me to fund her plastic surgery while my son went deeper into debt? Michael, I can't lend you any more money until you pay back what you already owe me. So you're going to let your son lose his house because you're worried about money? You're not going to lose your house over $20,000. Jessica says you're being selfish. She says a real mother would help her son without keeping score. That's when I realized what was happening. Jessica wasn't just isolating Michael from me emotionally. She was creating financial dependence that would make it impossible for him to leave her even if he wanted to. Every expensive purchase, every loan, every debt was another chain binding him to a lifestyle he couldn't afford and a woman who was bankrupting him. Keep watching, because what we discovered about inherited trauma would not only heal our family, but it would save hundreds of others. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most harmless. And what I discovered about Jessica's past would reveal that my son wasn't her first victim. He was just her latest target. After Michael's second request for money, I knew I had to do something. My son was drowning financially, isolated from his family, and completely under Jessica's control. But I needed evidence before I could approach him with my concerns. I hired a private investigator. I know how that sounds, like a crazy, overbearing mother-in-law who couldn't accept her son's marriage. But I was desperate, and my instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. The investigator, Maria Santos, was a former police detective who specialized in financial fraud cases. Mrs. Mitchell, she said during our first meeting, what exactly are you hoping to find? I don't know. I just know that my son has changed completely since marrying this woman, and I'm worried she's taking advantage of him. That's not uncommon in these situations, but I need you to understand that what I find might not be what you want to hear. I just want the truth. Maria's investigation took 3 weeks. When she called to schedule our follow-up meeting, her voice was grim. Mrs. Mitchell, I think you should sit down for this conversation. What Maria had discovered was worse than anything I could have imagined. Jessica's real name was Jennifer Walsh. She'd changed it legally 2 years before meeting Michael. Her social media presence as an influencer was completely fabricated. She'd bought fake followers and engagement to create the illusion of success. But that was just the beginning. Jennifer has been married twice before, Maria told me, sliding a folder across the table. Both marriages followed the same pattern as what you've described with your son. The first husband was David Chen, a software engineer she'd married when she was 22. Within 2 years, she'd isolated him from his family, convinced him to buy an expensive house and car, and racked up over $100,000 in credit card debt in his name. The marriage ended when David's parents hired a forensic accountant. They discovered that Jennifer had been systematically stealing from his accounts and using his credit to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford. The second husband was Robert Martinez, a doctor she'd married at 24. Same pattern: isolation from family, expensive lifestyle, mounting debt. Dr. Martinez lost his medical practice because of the financial strain. Jennifer had convinced him to take out loans against his practice to fund her spending. When he couldn't make the payments, he lost everything. Both men had tried to warn others about Jennifer, but she'd moved to different cities and changed her name each time. She's what we call a financial predator, Maria explained. She targets successful men, isolates them from their support systems, and systematically drains their resources. But why? What does she get out of it? Money, lifestyle, control. Some people are addicted to drugs or alcohol. Jennifer is addicted to spending other people's money and the power that comes with manipulating them. Maria had also discovered that Jessica's brand partnerships were mostly fake. She'd created shell companies to make it look like she was earning money, but in reality, she was living entirely off Michael's income and the loans she'd convinced him to take out. Your son has taken out 3 credit cards in the past year, all maxed out. He's also taken a loan against his 401k and increased his mortgage with a cash-out refinance. How much debt are we talking about? Based on what I can find, approximately $200,000. $200,000. In less than 2 years of marriage, Jessica had put my son $200,000 in debt. There's more, Maria said. Jennifer has been in contact with a divorce attorney for the past month. She's planning to leave him? It appears so, and based on the pattern with her previous marriages, she'll take him for everything she can in the divorce. Maria showed me emails that Jennifer had sent to the divorce attorney, discussing strategy for maximizing her settlement. She's documented every gift Michael has given her, every expense he's paid for, every asset they've acquired together. She's building a case for spousal support and asset division. But they've only been married 2 years. In this state, she's entitled to spousal support and half of everything acquired during the marriage. Given the debt load, Michael will be paying her alimony while struggling to pay off the debt she created. I sat in that office staring at evidence of my son's financial destruction and felt sick. What can I do? Legally, not much. Michael is an adult, and he's made these financial decisions voluntarily, even if he was manipulated into them. So I just have to watch her destroy him? You can try to show him this evidence,
But be prepared for him to not believe you. Victims of financial abuse often defend their abusers, especially when the abuse has been gradual and psychological. What if he doesn't listen? Then you document everything and hope that when the divorce happens, he'll have the evidence he needs to protect himself. That night, I sat in my kitchen with Maria's report spread across the table, trying to figure out how to save my son from a woman who was systematically destroying his life. Jessica wasn't just a gold digger. She was a professional con artist who had perfected the art of financial and emotional manipulation, and my son was her latest victim. You need to see how our family's darkest secret became the foundation for a movement that would change lives across the country. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that can save someone's life, and confronting Michael with the truth about Jessica would test everything I thought I knew about being a mother. I spent 3 days deciding how to approach Michael with Maria's findings. I knew that if I came across as the jealous mother-in-law attacking his wife, he'd shut down completely. But I also knew that Jessica was planning to divorce him and leave him financially ruined. I decided to start with the financial information, concrete facts that couldn't be dismissed as personal opinion. I called Michael and asked him to meet me for coffee, just the 2 of us. "I can't, Mom. Jessica and I have plans this weekend." "Michael, this is important. I need to talk to you about something serious." "Can't you just tell me over the phone?" "Please, sweetheart, 1 hour. That's all I'm asking." He finally agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near his office during his lunch break. When he arrived, I was shocked by how he looked. My son, who had always been confident and energetic, looked tired and stressed. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "You look exhausted, Michael. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with work."
How are things going financially? I know you mentioned some cash flow issues. His face immediately became guarded. We're managing. Why? I took a deep breath and pulled out a folder with some of Maria's findings, the financial documents that showed the extent of their debt. Michael, I'm worried about you. I had someone look into your financial situation, and I think you need to see this. You had someone investigate me? His voice was incredulous and angry. I had someone investigate Jessica, and what I found is very concerning. I showed him the documents detailing his debt load, the credit cards, the loans, the refinancing. Michael, you're $200,000 in debt. That's more than 3 times your annual salary. He stared at the papers, his face going pale. How did you get this information? That's not important. What's important is that you're in serious financial trouble. Jessica and I are handling our finances. You had no right to investigate us. I had every right to be concerned about my son who's drowning in debt and has been isolated from his family. Isolated? That's ridiculous. When's the last time you called me without me calling you first? When's the last time you came to a family gathering? When's the last time you made a decision without asking Jessica's permission? Michael was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing what I was saying. Jessica isn't isolating me. She's helping me become more independent. Independent? You've borrowed $35,000 from me and haven't paid back a penny. You're maxed out on credit cards. You've taken loans against your retirement. How is that independent? We've had some unexpected expenses like Jessica's BMW, her plastic surgery, her shopping trips. How do you know about... He stopped himself. Michael, Jessica isn't who you think she is. I showed him the information about her previous marriages, her real name, her pattern of financial abuse. This is insane, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my wife? I hired someone to find out why my successful, responsible son is suddenly drowning in debt and has cut off his entire family. Jessica hasn't cut off anyone. You're the one who's been judgmental and unwelcoming. Michael, look at these documents. Jessica has been married twice before. Both times she isolated her husband from his family, ran up massive debt, and then divorced them. That's not... Jessica told me she'd never been married before. She lied to you about her name, her past, her income, everything. I watched my son's face as the reality began to sink in. The confusion, the doubt, the slow recognition that he'd been deceived. She's planning to divorce you, I said gently. That's not true. I showed him the emails Maria had obtained. Michael read them in silence, his hands shaking. She's going to take everything, he whispered. Not if you protect yourself first. I can't believe this. I can't believe I've been so stupid. You're not stupid, sweetheart. You're a victim. Jessica is very good at what she does. She's had practice. Michael put his head in his hands. What am I going to do? I'm ruined. You're not ruined. You're 28 years old with a good job and a bright future. The debt can be managed, but you need to protect yourself before Jessica files for divorce. How? You need to see a lawyer immediately. You need to document Jessica's deception, her previous marriages, her pattern of financial abuse. You need to protect your assets and prepare for her to leave. She's my wife. I love her. I know you do, Michael, but she doesn't love you. She loves your money and your credit score. When those are gone, she'll be gone too. We sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours while Michael processed the truth about his marriage. It was heartbreaking to watch my son realize that the woman he'd loved and trusted had been systematically destroying his life. I feel so stupid, he said finally. You feel stupid because you trusted someone you loved. That's not stupidity, that's humanity. How did I not see this? Because she's a professional. She knew exactly how to manipulate you, how to isolate you from the people who might have warned you. You tried to warn me, didn't you? All those times you seemed concerned about Jessica? I tried to be supportive, but yes, I was worried from the beginning. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I shut you out. I'm sorry I chose her over you. You don't need to apologize. You need to protect yourself. Don't miss the conclusion, where you'll discover how losing everything I thought I wanted gave me everything I actually needed. 6 months after our coffee shop conversation, I was sitting in a courtroom watching Jessica's carefully constructed lies crumble under the weight of evidence that would shock even the most cynical divorce attorney. Michael had taken my advice and hired a lawyer immediately after our conversation. Attorney Patricia Williams specialized in high-conflict divorces involving financial abuse, and she was exactly what Michael needed. "Your case is unusual," she told Michael during their first meeting. "Most victims of financial predators don't have this much documentation of the abuse pattern." Maria's investigation had provided a roadmap of Jessica's methods, and Patricia used it to build an airtight case. The first step was protecting Michael's remaining assets. Patricia helped him freeze joint accounts, document all marital debt, and gather evidence of Jessica's deception about her identity and financial history. "We need to move fast," Patricia warned. "If Jessica realizes you're on to her, she'll accelerate her timeline." She was right. 2 weeks after Michael hired Patricia, Jessica filed for divorce. Her petition was everything Maria had predicted: demands for spousal support, half of all marital assets, and compensation for the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. She's asking for $5,000 a month in alimony, plus half the house value, half your retirement accounts, and half of everything else acquired during the marriage. "But most of what we acquired is debt." Exactly. She wants half the assets and none of the debt. Classic financial predator behavior. The divorce proceedings became a public spectacle when Patricia filed a counter-petition exposing Jessica's true identity and history. Jennifer Walsh, aka Jessica Mitchell, has engaged in a pattern of marriage fraud. She has systematically deceived the respondent about her identity, financial status, and marital history while engaging in financial abuse designed to maximize her divorce settlement. The local newspaper picked up the story. Local woman accused of marriage fraud and divorce case. Jessica's response was to play the victim. She gave an interview claiming that Michael's family had never accepted her and were now trying to destroy her reputation. "I'm just a woman who fell in love and got married. Now my husband's mother has hired private investigators to dig up lies about me?" But Patricia had evidence that couldn't be dismissed as family drama. The trial lasted 3 days. Patricia methodically presented evidence of Jessica's previous marriages, her pattern of financial abuse, and her deception about her identity and income. The respondent entered this marriage under false pretenses. She lied about her name, her past, and her financial status. She then systematically isolated the petitioner from his family while accumulating massive debt in his name. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim of a controlling family who couldn't accept their son's independence. Ms. Walsh simply wanted to build a life with her husband. The fact that his family disapproved of her doesn't constitute fraud. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing Jessica's spending patterns, credit reports documenting the debt accumulation, testimony from Jessica's previous husbands about identical patterns of behavior. The most damaging evidence came from Jessica's own communications with her divorce attorney, which Patricia had subpoenaed. "I need to maximize the settlement before he figures out what's happening,"
Jessica had written. "He's starting to ask questions about the debt." Another email was even more explicit. "The mother is getting suspicious. I need to move faster on the divorce timeline." When Jessica took the stand, Patricia's cross-examination was devastating. "Ms. Walsh, you told my client you'd never been married before. Was that true?" I didn't think my past relationships were relevant." "You were legally married twice before. You didn't think that was relevant to your current husband?" "Those marriages were mistakes. I wanted a fresh start." "A fresh start that included lying about your identity?" "I legally changed my name. That's not lying." "You changed your name to hide your history of financial abuse, didn't you?" "Objection," Jessica's lawyer called. "Sustained," the judge said. But the damage was done. Patricia continued methodically destroying Jessica's credibility, showing how every aspect of her relationship with Michael had been calculated manipulation. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The court finds that the respondent entered this marriage under fraudulent pretenses, Judge Harrison announced. She systematically deceived the petitioner about her identity, financial status, and marital history. Furthermore, the evidence shows a clear pattern of financial abuse designed to maximize the respondent's position in divorce proceedings. Jessica was awarded no alimony, no share of Michael's retirement accounts, and was held responsible for half of the marital debt she had created. The respondent will receive only her personal belongings and half the equity in the marital home, minus her share of the mortgage debt, the judge continued. Since the house was underwater due to the cash-out refinancing Jessica had insisted on, her share was actually negative. Jessica left the courtroom with less than she'd brought to the marriage, while Michael was free to rebuild his life without the burden of supporting his abuser.
But the legal victory was just the beginning of Michael's recovery. I feel like I've been in a cult for 2 years, he told me after the divorce was finalized. I can't believe I let her isolate me from you. You were manipulated by an expert, I replied. What matters now is that you're free. The financial recovery took longer. Michael had to declare bankruptcy to discharge the credit card debt, and he lost the house to foreclosure. But he moved back in with me temporarily while he rebuilt his credit and his life. I'm sorry I chose her over you, he said one evening as we cooked dinner together, something we hadn't done in 3 years. You didn't choose her over me, I said. You were tricked into thinking you had to choose at all. Sometimes the most broken families become the strongest ones when they're rebuilt on truth instead of lies. 2 years after Jessica's lies were exposed in court, I'm sitting in Michael's new apartment watching him cook dinner for his girlfriend, Sarah, a kind, genuine woman who loves him for who he is, not what he can buy her. And I'm amazed by how much stronger our relationship became after surviving Jessica's attempt to destroy it. Mom, can you pass the salt? Michael asks, and I smile at how natural it sounds. For 3 years, Jessica had made him feel guilty for including me in simple moments like this. Sarah, a nurse who works at the children's hospital, has been nothing like Jessica. She insisted on meeting me early in their relationship, asks about Michael's childhood, and encourages him to maintain close family ties. I can't imagine trying to separate someone from their family, she told me when I thanked her for being so welcoming. Family relationships are precious. Why would anyone want to destroy that? Michael's financial recovery has been remarkable. After the bankruptcy and foreclosure, he started over with a clean slate. He's living within his means, saving money again, and has learned to recognize the warning signs of financial manipulation. I'll never be that naive again, he told me recently. Jessica taught me that love doesn't require you to go into debt or cut off your family. The experience has also brought us closer than we've ever been. Michael now calls me twice a week, not because he has to, but because he wants to. He comes to family gatherings, remembers important dates, and includes me in his life decisions. I missed you so much during those 3 years, he admitted recently. I didn't realize how much until I got you back. We've also become advocates for other families dealing with similar situations. Michael speaks at support groups for victims of financial abuse, sharing his story to help others recognize the warning signs. The isolation happens so gradually that you don't notice it. One day you're close to your family, and the next day you feel guilty for talking to them. That's not love. That's control. I've started a support group for parents whose adult children have been isolated by manipulative partners. We meet monthly, sharing strategies for maintaining connection and recognizing when intervention might be necessary. Trust your instincts. If your child's partner is discouraging family relationships, that's a red flag. Healthy relationships bring families together. They don't tear them apart. The group has helped dozens of families navigate similar situations. Some have been able to maintain relationships despite manipulative in-laws. Others have had to wait, like I did, for the truth to emerge. The most important thing is to stay available, says Patricia, a group member whose daughter was isolated by an abusive husband. Don't give up on them, even when they seem to give up on you. Michael has also reconnected with his father's memory in ways that Jessica had discouraged. We visit David's grave together on his birthday and anniversary. Michael talks about his father openly again, sharing memories and stories that Jessica had made him feel guilty about. "She tried to erase Dad from my life," Michael said during our last visit to the cemetery. "She said I was living in the past and needed to move forward. But remembering Dad isn't living in the past, it's honoring where I came from." The legal case against Jessica had wider implications than just our family. Her pattern of marriage fraud led to criminal charges in 2 other states where she'd committed similar crimes. Your son's courage to fight back has protected other potential victims, attorney Patricia Williams told me. Jessica won't be able to do this to anyone else. Jessica was eventually sentenced to 3 years in prison for marriage fraud and identity theft. She's also required to pay restitution to her previous victims. "I don't feel sorry for her," Michael said when we heard about her sentencing. "She made calculated decisions to hurt people. She deserves the consequences." But perhaps the most meaningful outcome has been watching Michael develop healthy relationship patterns with Sarah. "I told Sarah everything about Jessica from the beginning," he explained. "I wanted her to understand why I might be cautious about certain things." Sarah has been incredibly patient with Michael's recovery process. She encourages my relationship with me, includes me in their plans, and has never made him feel guilty for maintaining family connections. "She's the opposite of Jessica in every way," Michael told me. "She makes me feel stronger, not weaker. She encourages my relationships. She doesn't isolate me from them." Last month, Michael asked for my blessing to propose to Sarah. "Are you sure you're ready?" I asked, not because I doubted Sarah, but because I wanted to make sure Michael had fully healed from Jessica's abuse. He said, "I'm sure. But this time, I want you involved in every step. I want your input on the ring, your help planning the proposal, your blessing on the marriage. I never want to shut you out again." The proposal was beautiful, a family affair that included me, Sarah's parents, and all the people who love and support them. Everything Jessica had tried to prevent. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Michael said at their engagement party. "Thank you for fighting for our relationship even when I couldn't see what was happening. Thank you for finding your way back to me," I replied. As I watch Michael and Sarah plan their wedding, a celebration that will include both families, honor Michael's father's memory, and celebrate genuine love instead of manipulation, I'm grateful for the journey we've been on. Jessica tried to steal my son, but in the end, she only made our bond stronger. She tried to erase our family history, but it made us more determined to preserve it. She tried to isolate Michael from love, but it taught him to recognize and value real love when he found it. Sometimes the people who try to destroy your family end up teaching you how precious family really is. Jessica thought she was taking my son away from me, but she actually gave him back to me stronger, wiser, and more grateful for the love we share. The end. Have you ever watched a manipulative person try to isolate someone you love? Have you struggled with how to help an adult child who's in a controlling relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help another family recognize the warning signs before it's too late.